The last shot on your shot list is night photography and how you can adjust to get the 3 previous lessons at night. Night photography is essential to being able to work with brands. It really shows your skill in photography, your knowledge of lighting, and how you're able to use and manipulate it. I think at night, it's a completely different atmosphere. I think you'll see a completely different crowd. I think you'll see people dressed completely different, acting completely different. You'll see the lights come on, and I think that offers a whole new world of content for you to be able to capture. Night photography is all about lighting. So when I'm shooting at night, I'm worried about my shutter speed and my ISO. I'm trying to keep a great balance in between that without getting my shutter speed too low and my ISO too high. So with my ISO is too high, I'm going to get some noisy images. With my shutter speed too low and me moving around that quick, I'm going to get some blurry shots, which I don't want. So this is a night shot I took in New York City. I took it in the LES, the Lower East Side. I was just walking, taking photos by myself in New York City, and I had made a right and I started walking down the street. And as I got midway, I noticed it. And I noticed the car in the foreground and the light that was coming from there. And I just waited about 2 minutes until I really finally had some subject matter that I liked and found was interesting. As for my artificial light, I was using the light that was coming from this grocery store. I thought it was pretty amazing. Everything around it on the rest of the street seemed closed and the lights off, but this grocery store was really bright. Another thing that I really like about it is the way that that light and store was reflecting on the hood of the car in the foreground. I thought that was really interesting. The other thing that I liked was the 2 subjects, the one that was in the store and one that was actually out of the store walking past. I just found both of them interesting. When you see this shot, you can obviously see that the car in front of me was blurry because of the low light. I have to compensate for it. So not only do I have a low shutter speed and a high ISO, but I also have a low aperture, which is causing that depth of field, which is causing that blur in the foreground. This is classic Chicago at night to me. This is an apartment building in Chicago, a common look to Chicago apartment buildings, symmetrical, nice courtyard, a gate in the front that's obviously blurry, once again talking about my low aperture, giving that foreground blurry because I'm focusing on the building in the background. Obviously, I also line that up. If you see that middle spike is coming straight through into the middle of the path. One thing that I like about this is that there's not much light happening, just light that's lighting up the courtyard. It's actually giving it a bit of an eerie vibe. One thing that I added to this to actually manipulate the eye in thinking that it was brighter was that I created a vignette around the image, making the corners darker to bring out the light in the middle of the image without actually brightening, increasing the exposure of the image.
We are on LaSalle Street. Going to be walking up and down. It's one of my favorite places to walk on during sunrise. It's just a lot of traffic. Most people here are still groggy just from their early morning before they had their coffee, so you can kind of get away taking some street portraits of them, which is my favorite time. When you walk more towards Jackson on LaSalle, you get towards more of the financial area, a lot more banks, so you get a lot more people in suits if you're looking for that, which I usually am, just to get that kind of eerie business vibe with some of the Roman architecture for like the banks and stuff like that. But I really want to use as much architecture as possible and then use my subject to complement all of it and to help compose a shot to tell a story. Here's actually something I love. So I love this architecture right here. I love these lines that are happening and the way it just descends. So I'm gonna probably like frame my shot up like this. But this is something where I could just stand here, hold my composition, and as people come, I can just begin to take portraits of them. And I can just like almost stack up my portraits if I wanted. Guy with the briefcase, wearing a suit, long trench coat. Exactly what I was looking for. Telling a story. Got character. Being a cityscape photographer, I'm just drawn to the city life and everything that comes with it, and those type of vibes and that type of lifestyle. So I think being downtown, being in the financial district, it just makes sense. You kind of expect that. You don't expect to see just somebody with jeans. I feel like it doesn't really fit. So if you can put the right subject in the right setting as it naturally happens and take a photo of that, I think that just comes off really powerful, but right, you know? Like it just is like an accurate photo. And at that point, I feel like it becomes timeless. You know what I mean? Let's keep moving. It's not that much light out, so I gotta be as still as possible. There you go. That was a tight one. I got to frame up my shot, stay there for a moment, really hold it, my composition. That's how I was able to get him like perfectly right in front of that door, you know? And do the face mask look crazy. All right, say let's walk across the street and then do the same thing walking back. I think that's the beautiful thing about shooting Y, like with the 35 or even with the 24, is that you get to really like compose your shots. You get a lot more room to like fill in, so you get a lot more to work with. So I feel like every time I'm like shooting portraits or even shooting lookups or anything on the street, I'm always at the edge of the sidewalks, just so you have as much sidewalk room to work with when you're trying to compose your shots. Just waiting for the right person to come into my frame. Hey, this lady. Ooh, I like that lady. Let's see what this guy looks like. Let's keep moving. I think the main thing that I try to do when I'm out here shooting and trying to get these shots for these portraits is that I really try to compose my shots first. I see how I want to capture my shot and let really the subject stroll into the shot and just capture that. So I already know how good my shot has the potential to be, and I'm already happy with it. So once I have it, I can stand still and almost blend into what's happening around me. So no one actually begins to notice me at that point, which allows me to even be able to get more shots in, and to get shots unrecognized, to get more of that candid shot without them knowing I'm taking their photo. Hold up. I like this complete surface. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. And you see it's just like this one from floor to ceiling, this one clean surface, and then you just get to isolate your subject and they just stand out so much. For me, I'm even like a real symmetrical photographer. I love shooting symmetry. I love my shots to be clean, to all be lined up, have rule of thirds. I'm not a photographer to just shoot aimlessly. I want my shots to be composed, even though they are candid and they are kind of off the cuff. I still want to have a composed shot. So at this point, I'm just waiting for a subject to come in. I know my composition. I really like this statue, and I think I'm gonna try to compose something here so I can just wait for my subject to come in. I'm gonna take this guy on the right. Yeah, got him. I think one main thing to take away though is that you have every right to be out here taking photos. You have every right to be taking photos of these people, or portraits of anyone that are walking the streets. If they're out in public, you have the right to take their photo. A crazy person could come up to you and start threatening you, and you might definitely want to delete that. Yeah, stay back real quick, because I'll stay kind of far, because I'm gonna try to get this guy smoking right here. I want him on the exhale. I like the architecture, I like the vanishing point. I like the subject, I like that he's in a suit. I like the gray hair. I like the vibe of just him reading that newspaper. You can tell that was like something he does every day, you know? It was so authentic to him. And I think that's also really a key factor when shooting street portraits. You want to shoot something that's really authentic. And people feel authentic. They know it. You can't hide it. You can't fake it, I should say. Like, come on, it's one of the most epic lookups in Chicago. So tight. The things that I'm looking for when shooting lookups is trying to capture a negative space, also like height, scale, symmetry, details, maybe reflections into the glass, the brick, and even using those as like composition. I think sometimes it's really interesting putting something that's really old school with brick next to something that's modern and new age, and that's nothing but steel and glass. And I look for all those things when I'm doing a lookup.
Once again, just using the building's lines any way I can to really just compose my shots. You want to see things in a different way as much as possible. Yeah, obviously you want to use the rule of thirds and that type of things for your composition, but like, don't be afraid to explore, try new things, try new angles, try to line them up in weird ways, and just take the photo and see how it works out. You never know until you try. It's probably one of my favorite lookups in Chicago. This is the Chase building, and the architecture of this building is just so amazing. You can just see it just slants up like that. I take everyone here who comes new into town just as a lookup, but if you look up, it's just amazing. It's definitely one of my favorite intersections. Using 3 of my favorite lenses that I always have in my bag, a 50, 24, and a 14. I'm going to show you guys the different perspectives you can capture using those lenses for a lookup. Going in order. First was my 50, and my 24. So with the 50, I was only capturing really close to the top of the building. Once I put my 24 on, I'm capturing almost twice as much information. So with this 14, you can see the difference in the glass between the 24 and the 14. How the 14 is really round versus the 24. With the 14, I'm not only able to capture these main buildings, but I'm actually able to capture the buildings all around it, creating a more fuller lookup, but also adding a ton of scale to these buildings. When I'm first shooting, I'm looking for the overall size and scale of these buildings. I want them to feel tall in the photos. And then I'm also thinking about the detail of the building, the lines. If you notice, this building has a bunch of lines, but this actual particular one right here actually matches up with the middle of the building across from it. So you get this really clean, symmetrical photo when you're doing a lookup. What's nice about alleys is that usually both buildings are blocking the sun, so you get this even light no matter what. So I think a great point to make is that I don't need a fast shutter speed to shoot lookups. So I can really lower it, keep a steady hand, and really increase my aperture to capture as much depth of field as possible. I think the beautiful thing about lookups is that you really get to take your time, line up your shot. The buildings aren't moving, it's a still subject, and you can just get your exposure right, get your angles right, your scale, your perspective, line up your corners. I think one of the easiest lookups is just the corner of a building, especially a square building, because it just allows you for this even symmetrical shot. It's classic, easy, but provoking at the same time. It is a great way to show scale. I mean, this is just a beautiful lookup. Match symmetrical, really unique, perfect architecture, great detail, leading lines that take you all the way to the top. The scale is massive. You got buildings around. You can either isolate the building by itself or add other buildings in to add more negative space. I think the really cool thing about lookups too is that you could shoot the same lookup so many different ways to tell a different story. You could shoot it on a bright blue day and you get this warm weather type feeling, or you can shoot it when it's foggy and the top of the building is disappearing into the sky and you have this moody photo. You shoot when it's raining or snowing, and you're always gonna get this different type of vibe and different type of feel to it, which is awesome. So at one of the train platforms in Chicago, I'm trying to capture a moving blur shot as one of my shots from my shot list. Here I'm going to try to capture the train as a motion in the environment around it still, but also the train as a still and clear shot, but the environment blurry. Right now I'm using this handrail to help keep my shot as steady as possible. When the train actually comes, it does move around, but I actually don't have a shutter that's that long, so I should be fine. I'm playing with my settings. I don't have a 30-second exposure. It's not a nighttime shot, and I still want some definition from the train. If my shutter's too long, the motion of the blur is going to be way too smooth. Even though I want it to be smooth, I still want some definition to show that it is a train. You can actually see it right here, complete blur of the train as it passed, with the environment perfectly still thanks to that handrail. But I actually like that last clip where you can see the end of the trail and the lights that came with it. When trying to capture subject as a still object, once it begins to come close to me, I'm already locking on to the front of it, and I'm holding that focus, the same focus, as I'm panning all the way across from right to left or left to right. For 1 second, you and the subject align to capture that still moment while everything else is blurry. Here the front of the CTA isn't still, but even the back of the CTA and everything around it is blurry. But I even followed it along, and you see the front is clear, the entire background is blurry. I just found that capturing a motion blur with the subject closer to the camera, I just can't achieve the same result. I think it's a lot harder in my personal opinion. So we're underground trying to capture a motion blur shot of a train. I don't really have anything to use as a base like a handrail or a tripod, so I gotta anticipate where I'm gonna be when the train is passing me by as fastest, so I don't have to have that slow of a shutter speed, so I can be handheld, really using my leg as a base to get the shot. So here I got the train passing me by. I know that I'm at the end of this platform, so I know that the train is gonna pass me by at its quickest pace as it arrives. I'm actually gonna be using the floor. You can see that there's a small water puddle happening here. So I'm gonna put my camera on the floor, use the floor as my base to keep my camera still, and get some motion blur shots of this train with a cool reflection happening as well. actually some monstrous motion blur happening. Really liking this yellow line. But I just kept firing and firing until I found one that I liked. You should see the front of the tree right here. Some nice light trails happening. So I'm focusing on the environment. Just focusing on the environment so I can keep that still. Not focusing on the train because that's going to be blurry. And then just take as many shots as I can.